Hi everyone, so we're going to move on to marine ecosystems that involve our ocean communities. So we're moving past our coast and going into more of our open ocean. So to start, there's a couple of different terms that we want to define to help us when we're talking about our different communities here. So producers, these should be pretty familiar terms for you. So a producer is an organism that can photosynthesize and make its own food or energy. A lot of times the producers are also organisms that other animals are going to be eating to get energy for themselves. And those animals that do the eating are going to be called the consumers. So all the things that are producers are going to be more like plants or animals that are able to photosynthesize. So some examples here are algae and different types of aquatic plants. And then our consumers, the organisms that need to eat their food for energy, are going to be more of our fish and marine mammals here. A few more terms here. Plankton is any organism, plant, or animal that floats along with currents rather than being able to swim and move on their own. So animals that are going to be considered plankton are going to be microscopic plants and animals. Those plants are going to be called photoplankton, and those microscopic animals are going to be called zooplankton. Jellyfish can be is an organism that's going to float along. It's considered under that plankton zone. And then the larvae of many organisms are also going to be considered plankton here. In comparison, our nekton is going to be any organism that can swim against the currents of the ocean. So fish and marine mammals are going to be really good examples of these. So our pelagic zone or our open ocean is located beyond those coastal communities. So remember that our coral reefs, they're not right on the coast, but they're a little bit off in those shallow waters. Those are going to be all coastal communities, and now we're moving even further into our open ocean here. And we can see that this is divided into two specific parts that we're going to talk about, our photic zone and our aphotic zone. So if we're thinking about that prefix there, photic or phot, we're going to think of photosynthesis, which requires light. So how these regions are defined is whether or not sunlight can penetrate through that water. So in our photic zone, we're going to see sunlight can penetrate. And for our aphotic zone, we're going to see that it's too deep for that sunlight to be able to penetrate. So if we look here, we can see our photic zone. This is where we're going to see all that light coming in, a lot of our plants here, because they need sunlight to do photosynthesis. Down here, which is going to be the majority of our ocean, is going to be our aphotic zone. And then over here is one that we haven't mentioned yet, but this runs along the bottom of the ocean, and that's going to be called our benthic zone. So if we're talking more about our photic zone on average can penetrate about 200 meters or 600 feet down where light can reach. We're also going to see that in this region of photosynthesis, we're going to see many and pretty much all of our producers are going to be able to live here because, again, to do photosynthesis, you require light. So our producers who do photosynthesis are going to need this light to survive and to make that food. So our plant plankton is going to be called photoplankton, like I mentioned before. And again, they're going to be using up that sunlight, and they're going to be found in this photic zone. And really interesting here, our photic zone is not that big because light can only penetrate down about 600 feet into the water, but 90% of our living things, that includes both plant and animals, are going to live in this zone because, again, where those plants are, they're food sources for many different animals. Even the animals that require, that eat other animals, our plant life is going to heavily drive where we see our animal life here. Especially with our marine mammals, because again, they do need to surface to breathe air because they cannot breathe that water. So some of these organisms that we're going to see in our photic zone are going to be those animals that move with the currents, because our currents are going to be more seen on the ocean surface here. So our phytoplankton, our plant plankton, our zooplankton, which is our animal plankton, jellyfish, sea turtles, tuna, a lot of other fish, whales, dolphins, all of these organisms are going to be found in our photic zone. But in order to live here, these animals are also going to have many different adaptations that they have. So some adaptations for our planktons that float in the current. So since you just float in the current and you can't run away because you can't swim against that current, you need different adaptations to help you protect yourself from predators. So some of those adaptations are going to be tentacles that you can use for stinging and that have poison in them. So if you think of jellyfish, our jellyfish have those tentacles that are able to sting and can be pretty lethal to different animals, including us as humans. And then we're also going to see another way that they survive, their species survives, is that they reproduce in really large quantities. So the individual animal may not live very long, but since they're able to reproduce very quickly and in very large quantities, the species as a whole tend to survive pretty well. So some adaptations for our nekton, more specifically fish. These are going to include very streamlined bodies, which is going to allow them to swim really quickly. So sharks and tuna, you're going to see that. Most fish are going to be streamlined like this. And then we're also going to see gills. So gills are a really cool adaptation instead of lungs that help remove oxygen from the water. So all fish are going to have gills. We're also going to see an increased muscle mass, and this is going to help these fish swim really long distances without having to rest. So if you think about fish and what we eat and what part of the fish we eat, pretty much when you're cleaning a fish for food, all you have to do is take off that skin and the bones out of the fish and you're able to eat the rest. So this is due to that really high muscle mass that we have. When you eat other animals like land animals, you have to deal a lot more with fat and different things like that are also there. Another thing to help fish camouflage here are those dark tops and our light underside that they use for camouflage. So if you're looking down at the water, it's going to seem darker as you're looking down because you're not looking at a light source. So them having that dark top is going to help predators who are above them not see them. And if you're underneath and you're looking up towards the surface of the water, up towards the sun, this light underside is going to help, again, camouflage because we're seeing those differences in light there. Another thing here is our lunate tail. It's kind of like a paddle tail, which really helps those fish swim really quickly. And I'll show you an image of that in just a second. And then we'll see our superior mouth versus our terminal mouth. So our superior mouth tends to feed on animals that are above them, where our terminal mouth is based on our chase and catch of other fish. So if we take a look at images here, our superior mouth is facing more upwards, and our terminal mouth is facing more directly in front. So those animals that are going to be feeding off of plankton that are above them, having that superior mouth adaptation is really going to help them with their feeding, where our terminal mouth, being able to open their mouth straight on, is going to help for that more chase and catch type of hunting that they'll do. And here we can also see our nice flat lunate tail. If we think of boats and how they have those paddles to help them steer, it's going to help those fish take those corners really quickly and able to swim even faster to help them get away from predators, catch their food, all these different things. So if we take a look, we can see our nice lunate tail here, and we can see another important adaptation that fish have is that they kind of survive in these schools. So there's a lot of fish in a very small amount of area, which actually makes it more difficult for predators to eat those fish. So that's another adaptation that they've kind of collected here. So lastly, we're going to talk about some adaptations for Nekton that are mammals, so our marine mammals here. Again, we're going to see this really nice streamlined body. Our dolphins and seals are going to have those nice streamlined body. A very large lung capacity, so in comparison to humans, this diving time for different marine mammals is extremely long. Humans can usually hold their breath for between 30 to a minute and 30 seconds. Where these animals are going to be underwater for sometimes hours at a time. So they're having that huge lung capacity to help them survive underwater is very important. This blowhole is also really important. So remember that this blowhole is located on the tops of these animals' heads or kind of on their backs. So instead of having to bring their full face above the water to take a breath, they're able to just take just surface, and I'll take that nice big breath of air before they go back underneath the water here. Another thing is filter feeding. So whales will tend to swim with their mouths open and collect all of the food that's in front of them, and then release anything that they don't want. So this is a really different adaptation here. We also see teeth and speed as a good adaptation. So we'll see this mostly with dolphins and seals and some toothed whales. And those are going to be important for hunting. And then voluntary breathing is our last adaptation that we see here. So we have full control of when these breaths are taken. So if these animals are sleeping, for example, they have to remain just enough conscious to remember to float up to the top and take those breaths that they need to survive. So again, if we take a look here, we can see these teeth, very streamlined bodies that help them cut through the water very well here. So this is where we're going to stop for today. If you have any questions, please reach out to me.